Good evening. Thank you for stopping by, Little Eclipse. Sorry, did not see that sooner. Hello, Darren John. Nice to see you. Let me just take a quick sip of something. My throat is bothering me a little bit, so I have a good tea for that, and I'm probably just going to read one or two stories tonight. But one of them, the first one, is going to be a bit of a, well, you know what, let's start with something else before I dive into Carmilla. Let me start with another story before I dive into Carmilla. My plan, though, I really want to read through Carmilla. Apparently, Carmilla is one, well, maybe not the very first example of a lesbian vampire, but it's the first finished piece, I suppose, with that trope. So, like, not quite the, it's not like a trope namer, and it's not like the prototypical example. It's not prototypical, but it's close. It's close. And also, Carmilla predates Dracula. And I want to say, I've read Dracula. It was long and kind of boring. Maybe not the worst, but like between that and Frankenstein, they had periods of writing. Well, Marks, lesbian vampires are a trope? Apparently they are. I suppose it's, let's see. I've got it open. Like, okay, we're talking about like literature for it. Okay. Looking at some of the other ones, I think it's, I guess, like more extended to like bisexual vampire ladies. It seems like they don't care what the gender of who they bite is. More so, because thinking about like Dracula. Okay, so Dracula did feed on his one, I don't want to say employee, but he did have one character he fed on that was male, but the rest he seemed to like angle for women more so. It seems like men were just like a last resort type of thing, or like if he really needed something done. Because I can't remember his name. The servant. What was his name? I was just listening to like Renfield. It was Renfield. I have there's a musical about Dracula, and I have Renfield's song on there, but they don't mention his name anywhere in it. So, I want to say maybe there could be a lot of reasons for, like, I guess most vampires mostly targeting women. I feel like maybe it's a bit more believable somehow. But there's also, I guess, just the angle of like, that's what men want to see, perhaps. Who's going to be reading it at the time? Apparently, Carmilla, though, is supposed to be interesting because it's not, despite the time frame that it was written in, the 1800s, it did not portray the, I guess, like the lesbian angle badly. It was not, that wasn't the bad part of it all. The vampire was the bad part. The lesbians were fine. Okay. But before that, Let's try out a different vampire story first. A short one. A really short one. A really short one. Give me a moment. Okay, okay. We've got the book out. We've got the book out. What do we read first? What do we read first? Carmilla is about 60 pages or so. A lot of the other stories in here are shorter. So we read The Sad Story of a Vampire and The Tomb of Sarah before. There is Good Lady Ducayne. I think let's see, 125, 125. 125. Good Lady Ducayne. Okay, we'll start with the Good Lady Ducayne first, because I think this is also another tale that might be not quite the same vein, but similar vein. So let me put up a little notice about it. And also maybe change the title so it's not Carmilla. I have my own little psychic vampire here who's crying, crying, crying. Okay, let's see. Okay, we've got that up. I'm just going to shorten it to early lady vampire fiction, because that's really what this all is. That's really what it all is. And actually, one more minute, I'm going to check and see if my haunter in the dark actually wants to come in, or if he's just crying for no reason. Oh, he was right there. He was right there at the door, still waiting. Hopefully that click wasn't too loud. I have extra padding on the bottom of my keyboard, and I can tempt him to stay up in my arms if I remove it. It gives him more space. It looks like he's not interested in that. Oh no, he's gonna be bad. He's gonna be bad. Give me a second. I think he wants to watch the sunset through my window, and when he does that, he wants the window open, and I cannot do that right now. It's too noisy. But I can see him ready to pounce up to his window seat. Okay, let's get this ready. Okay. Good Lady Ducayne by M.E. Braddon. That's Mary Elizabeth Braddon. Bella Rolliston had made up her mind that her only chance of earning her bread and helping her mother to an occasional crust was by going out into the great unknown world as a companion to a lady. She was willing to go to any lady rich enough to pay her a salary, and so eccentric as to wish for a hired companion. 5 shillings told off reluctantly from one of those sovereigns which were so rare with the mother and daughter, and which melted away so quickly. 5 solid shillings had been handed to a smartly dressed lady in an office in Harbeck Street, London, West, in hopes that this very superior person would find a situation and a salary for Miss Rolliston. The superior person glanced at the 2 half-crowns as they lay on the table where Bella's hand had placed them, to make sure they were neither of them florins, before she wrote a description of Bella's qualifications and requirements in a formidable-looking ledger. "Age?" she asked, curtly. 18, last July. "Any accomplishments?" "No, I'm not at all accomplished. If I were, I should want to be a governess. A companion seems the lowest stage." We have some highly accomplished ladies on our books as companions, or chaperone companions. Oh, I know, babbled Bella, loquacious in her youthful candor. But that is quite a different thing. Mother hasn't been able to afford a piano since I was 12 years old, so I'm afraid I've forgotten how to play. And I've had to help Mother with her needlework, so there hasn't been much time to study. Please don't waste time upon explaining what you can't do, but kindly tell me anything you can do, said the superior person, crushingly, with her pen poised between delicate fingers waiting to write. Can you read aloud for 2 or 3 hours at a stretch? Are you active and handy, an early riser, a good walker, sweet-tempered and obliging? I can say yes to all those questions about the sweetness, except about the sweetness. I think I have a pretty good temper, and I should be anxious to oblige anybody who paid for my services. I should want them to feel that I was really earning my salary. The kind of ladies who come to me would not care for a talkative companion, said the person severely, having finished writing in her book. My connection lies chiefly among the aristocracy, and in that class considerable deference is expected. Oh, of course, said Bella. But it's quite different when I'm talking to you. I want to tell you all about myself once and forever. I am glad it is to be only once, said the person, with the edges of her lips. The person was of uncertain age, tightly laced in a black silk gown. She had a powdery complexion and a handsome clump of somebody else's hair on the top of her head. It may be that Bella's girlish freshness and vivacity had an irritating effect upon nerves weakened by an 8-hour day in that overheated second floor in Harbeck Street. To Bella, the official apartment, with its Brussels carpet, velvet curtains, and velvet chairs, and French clock, ticking loud on the marble chimney-piece, suggested the luxury of a palace, as compared with another second floor in Walworth, where Mrs. Rolliston and her daughter had managed to exist the last 6 years. Do you think you have anything on your books that would suit me? Faltered Bella, after a pause. Oh dear, no. I have nothing in view at present, answered the person, who had swept Bella's half-crowns into a drawer absent-mindedly with the tips of her fingers. You see, you are so very unformed, so much too young to be a companion to a lady of position. It is a pity you have not enough education for a nursery governess. That would be more in your line. And do you think it will be very long before you can get me a situation? Asked Bella doubtfully. I really cannot say. Have you any particular reason for being so impatient? Not a love affair, I hope. A love affair, cried Bella, with flaming cheeks. What utter nonsense. I want a situation because my mother is poor, and I hate being a burden to her. I want a salary that I can share with her. There won't be much margin for sharing in the salary you are likely to get at your age, and with your very unformed manners, said the person, who found Bella's peony cheeks, bright eyes, and unbridled vivacity more and more oppressive. Perhaps if you'd be kind enough to give me back the fee, I could take it to an agency where the connection isn't quite so aristocratic, said Bella, who, as she told her mother in a recital for the interview, was determined not to be sat upon. You will find no agency that can do more for you than mine, replied the person, whose harpy fingers never relinquished coin. You will have to wait for your opportunity. Yours is an exceptional case, but I will bear you in mind, and if anything suitable offers, I will write to you. I cannot say more than that. Hello, Bardine. The half-contemptuous bend of the stately head, weighted with borrowed hair, indicated the end of the interview. Bella went back to Walworth, tramped sturdily every inch of the way in the September afternoon, and took off the superior person for the amusement of her mother and the landlady, who lingered in the shabby little sitting room after bringing in the tea tray, to applaud Miss Rollinston's Rolliston's taking off. Dear, dear, what a mimic she is, said the landlady. You ought to have her let her go to the stage, Mum. She might have made her fortune as an actress. Someone is upsetting. Someone is upsetting. Meow? Meow? What do you want? What do you want? No? No. Okay. My day has just started. I just woke up, so it's going well enough right now. I'm just debating what to do with my noisy visitor here, who is crying. Do I let him go? Or do I try and trap him even closer? Come here. Come here. Oh. Let's cuddle. Let's cuddle. Oh, no. You don't get to do that. Come cuddle. Come cuddle. Come cuddle. No, you don't move the mic. Don't move the mic. Don't rub into the pop filter. Come on. Come on. I don't know if you can hear him. He's purring. Not the loudest, but still he's purring. Hey. Trying to get him to settle down with me, but I don't know if that's going to happen. Oh yeah? Will you settle down? Come on. Come on. Oh, there we go. We got a flop. He is no. He is content. We've got him trapped. We've got him trapped. We've got him trapped. Yeah. That's a shame. Just thinking like, he doesn't have a whole lot of blood in him. He's probably just full of mostly kibble. Yeah, that right? You're a good boy. Oh, okay. A little better situated. Okay, let's hope I can hold the book with this. And he isn't too upset about having to share. Oh, okay, can I do this one-handed? I can, but it might be a little slower to flip pages now. Might be a little slower. Okay. Bella waited and hoped, and listened for the postman's knocks, which brought such store of letters for the parlors and the first floor, and so few for that humble second floor, where mother and daughter sat sewing with hands and with wheel and treadle for the greater part of the day. Mrs. Rolliston was a lady by birth and education, but it had been her bad fortune to marry a scoundrel. For the last half-dozen years she had been that worst of widows, a wife whose husband had deserted her. Happily, she was courageous, industrious, and a clever needlewoman, and she had just been able to earn a living for herself and her only child by making mantles and cloaks for her West End house. It was not a luxurious living. Cheap lodgings in a shabby street off the Walworth Road, scanty dinners, homely food, well-worn raiment had been the portion of mother and daughter, but they loved each other. They loved each other so dearly, and nature had made them both so light-hearted that they had contrived somehow to be happy. I'm gonna drop this book on this cat during one of these page flips. But now this idea of going out into the world as companion to some fine lady had rooted itself into Bella's mind. And although she idolized her mother, and although the parting of mother and daughter must needs tear two loving hearts in shreds, the girl longed for enterprise and change and excitement, as the pages of old longed to be knights, and to start for the Holy Land to break a lance with the infidel. She grew tired of racing downstairs every time the postman knocked, only to be told, "Nothing for you, miss," by the smudgy-faced drudge who picked up the letters from the passage floor. "Nothing for you, miss," grinned the lodging-house drudge, till at last Bella took heart of grace and walked up to Harbeck Street, and asked the superior person how it was that no situation had been found for her. "You're too young," said the person, "and you want a salary." "Of course I do," answered Bella. "Don't other people want salaries?" "Young ladies of your age generally want a comfortable home." "I don't," snapped Bella. "I want to help Mother." "You can call again this day week," said the person, "or if I hear anything in the meantime, I will write to you." No letter came from the person, and in exactly a week, Bella put on her nearest hat, the one that had been seldomest caught in the rain, and trudged off to Harbeck Street. It was a dull October afternoon, and there was a grayness in the air which might turn to fog before night. The Walworth Road shops gleamed brightly through that grey atmosphere, and though to a young lady reared in Mayfair or Belgravia, they were a snare and a temptation. Such shop windows would have been unworthy of a glance. They were a snare and a temptation for Bella. There were so many things that she longed for and would never be able to buy. Harbeck Street is apt to be empty at this dead season of the year. A long, long street, an endless perspective of eminently respectable houses. The person's office was at the other, further end, and Bella looked down that long, grey vista almost despairingly, more tired than usual with the trudge from Walworth. As she looked, a carriage passed her, in an old-fashioned yellow chariot, drawn by a pair of high grey horses, with the stateliest of coachmen driving them, and a tall footman sitting by his side. I have to resituate a little bit, and I don't want to lose my spot. How do I do this? How? Can I put this here, buddy? Can I put this here, sweet boy? Thanks. No. No. You have to share with the book. You have to share with the book. Okay. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, let's try this. It looks like the fairy godmother's coach, thought Bella. I shouldn't wonder if it began by being a pumpkin. It was a surprise when she reached the person's door to find the yellow chariot standing before it, and the tall footman waiting near the doorstep. She was almost afraid to go in and meet the owner of that splendid carriage. She had caught only a glimpse of its occupant as the chariot rolled by, a plumed bonnet, a patch of ermine. The person's smart page ushered her upstairs and locked at the official door. "Miss Rolliston," he announced, apologetically, while Bella waited outside. "Show her in," said the person, quickly, and then Bella heard her murmuring something in a low voice to her client. Bella went in fresh, blooming, a living image of youth and hope. "No, that's not your tea, my boy. That's not your tea. He keeps trying to drink from my stuff. He keeps trying to drink my stuff. No. Don't do that either. He is a menace to society. Absolute menace to society." Bella went in fresh, blooming, a living image of youth and hope, and before she looked at the person, her gaze was riveted by the owner of the chariot. Never had she seen anyone as old as the old lady sitting by the person's fire. A little old figure, wrapped from chin to feet in an ermine mantle, a withered, old-faced, under a plumed bonnet, a face so wasted by age that it seemed only a pair of eyes and a peaked chin. The nose was peaked, too, but between the sharply pointed chin and the great shining eyes, the small, aquiline nose was hardly visible. "This is Miss Rolliston, Lady Ducayne." Claw-like fingers, flashing with jewels, lifted a double eyeglass to Lady Ducayne's shining black eyes, And through the glasses, Bella saw those unnaturally bright eyes magnified to a gigantic size and glaring at her awfully. Miss Torpenter has told me all about you, said the old voice that belonged to the eyes. Have you good health? Are you strong and active, able to eat well, sleep well, walk well, able to enjoy all there is good in life? I have never known what it is to be ill or idle, answered Bella. Then I think you will do for me. Of course, in the event of references being perfectly satisfactory, put in the person. I don't want references. The young woman looks frank and innocent. I'll take her on trust. So like you, dear Lady Ducayne, murmured Miss Torpenter. I want a strong young woman whose health will give me no trouble. You have been so unfortunate in that respect, cooed the person, whose voice and manner was subdued to a melting sweetness by the old lady's presence. Yes, I've been rather unlucky, grunted Lady Ducayne. He's nesting inside of my arms. But I am sure Miss Rolliston will not disappoint you, though certainly after your unpleasant experience with Miss Thompson, who looked the picture of health, and Miss Blandy, who said she had never seen a doctor since she was vaccinated. Lies, no doubt, muttered Lady Ducayne, and then turning to Bella, she asked curtly, You don't mind spending the winter in Italy, I suppose? In Italy? The very word was magical. Bella's very young face flushed crimson. It has been a dream of my life to see Italy, she gasped. From Walworth to Italy. How far, how impossible such a journey had seemed to be that romantic dreamer. Well, your dream will be realized. Get yourself ready to leave Charing Cross by the train de luxe this day week at 11. Be sure you are at the station a quarter before the hour. My people will look after you and your luggage. Lady Ducayne rose from her chair. I'm sorry for that. He leapt and he almost took my. I have a little saucer to put tea bags when they are done steeping, and he almost knocked that off my table here while I was reading, and just I don't want that to shatter and break. I'm going to let him out so there's no more issues. Yeah, I have. I mean, right now it's not holding a tea bag per se, my little saucer. I don't know if there's a word for them. For these little tiny saucers. Like, if you've ever been to a sushi restaurant or something like that, where they have those like tiny little plates, I suppose, that people may pour soy sauce into. It's about that size, but this is used more so for like putting tea bags on specifically. And I have a dispenser. Diffuser is probably a better word right now on it. So like a reusable type of tea bag, except it's in the shape of a cat. It's a gray cat, like the cat that just left. The other day, actually, he almost knocked it right to the floor. He doesn't seem to like it. Maybe he thinks it's mocking him. Because, I mean, it sort of is mocking him. It's like this cute little cat with its paws up, so it can hook on the edge of the cup. And you fill it with tea. But it's rather hard to drink with it in, so just let the tea steep for as long as the instructions say, and then pull the cat out and sit his wet little butt onto the little saucer. Yep, 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 yep. Advanced tea making. Advanced tea making. Okay, let's see. Lady Ducayne rose from her chair, assisted by her crutch stick, and Miss Torpenter escorted her to the door. And with regard to salary, questioned the person on the way. Salary, oh, the same as usual. And if the young woman wants a quarter's pay in advance, you can write to me for a check, Lady Ducayne answered carelessly. Miss Torpenter went all the way downstairs with her client and waited to see her seated in the yellow chariot. When she came upstairs... Thank you for the follow. Thank you for the follow, Skimpton. When she came upstairs again, she was slightly out of breath, and she had resumed that superior manner which Bella had found so crushing. Okay. You may think yourself uncommonly lucky, Miss Rolliston, she said. I have dozens of young ladies on my books who I might have recommended for this situation, but I remembered having told you to call this afternoon, and I thought I would give you a chance. Old Lady Ducayne is one of the best people on my books. She gives her companion 100 a year and pays all traveling expenses. You will live in the lap of luxury. 100 a year? How too lovely! Shall I have to dress very grandly? Does Lady Ducayne keep much company? At her age? No, she lives in seclusion, in her own apartments. Her French maid, her footman, her medical attendant, her courier. Why did those other companions leave her? Asked Bella. Their health broke down. Poor things, so they had to leave? Yes, they had to leave. I suppose you would like a quarter's salary in advance? Oh, yes, please. I shall have things to buy. Very well. I will write for Lady Ducayne's check, and I will send you the balance, after deducting my commission for the year. To be sure, I had forgotten the commission. You don't suppose I keep this office for pleasure? Of course not, murmured Bella, remembering the 5 shillings entrance fee. But nobody could expect 100 a year in a winter in Italy for 5 shillings. I don't know a whole lot about the money system that's going on here. I do know that it's rather, I shouldn't say esoteric, but I do know that, like, it might be 2 guineas to a pound or something like that. Then you have farthings and shillings and pence. And I think there's a bob note in there, but I don't know the value of anything. Like, so to give up 5 shillings at this time period, like, what would that be equal to, I wonder? Like, was she paying essentially like $100 entrance fee, $1,000 entrance fee, $5 entrance fee? Not sure. Maybe I should think about, like, so 5 shillings, how much bread could that buy you? How much bread could that buy you? I think that's a fairly well marked judge. Or maybe more like rent, perhaps. But I want to say a loaf of bread is a loaf of bread, for the most part. Okay. We're going to be moving on to part 3. Part 3. It's actually quite... Okay, it's not super long. We've got another, like, 20 pages. Part 3. From Miss Rolliston at Cap Farino to Mrs. Rolliston in Beresford Street, Walworth, London. How I wish you could see this place, dearest. The blue sky, the olive woods, the orange and lemon orchards between the cliffs and the sea, sheltering in the hollow of the great hills, and with summer waves dancing up to the narrow ridge of pebbles and weeds, which is the Italian idea of a beach. Oh, how I wish you could see it all, mother dear, and bask in this sunshine that makes it so difficult to believe the date at the head of this paper. November! The air is like an English June. The sun is so hot that I can't walk a few yards without an umbrella. And to think of you at Walworth while I am here. I could cry at the thought that perhaps you will never see this lovely coast, this wonderful sea, these summer flowers that bloom in winter. There is a hedge of pink geraniums under my window, mother, a thick, rank hedge, as if the flowers grew wild. And there are Dijon roses climbing over the arches and palisades all along the terrace, a rose garden full of bloom in November. Just picture it all. You could never imagine the luxury of this hotel. It is nearly new, and it's been built and decorated regardless of expense. Our rooms are upholstered in pale blue satin, which shows up Lady Ducayne's parchment complexion. But as she sits all day in a corner of the balcony basking in the sun, except when she is in her carriage, and all the evening in her armchair close to the fire, and never sees anyone but her own people, her complexion matters very little. She has the handsomest suite of rooms in the hotel. My bedroom is inside hers, the sweetest room, all blue satin and white lace, white enameled furniture, looking glasses on every wall, till I know my pert little profile as I never knew it before. The room was really meant for Lady Ducayne's dressing room, but she ordered one of those blue satin couches to be arranged as a bed for me. The prettiest little bed, which I can wheel near the window on sunny mornings, and is on casters and easily moved about. I feel as if Lady Ducayne were a funny old grandmother who had suddenly appeared in my life, very, very rich and very, very kind. She is not at all exacting. I read aloud to her a good deal, and she dozes and nods while I read. Sometimes I hear her moaning in her sleep, as if she had troublesome dreams. When she is tired of my reading, she orders Francine, her maid, to read a French novel to her. And I hear her chuckle and groan now and then, as if she were more interested in those books than in Dickens or Scott. My French is not good enough to follow Francine, who reads very quickly. I have a great deal of liberty, for Lady Ducayne often tells me to run away and amuse myself. I roam about the hills for hours. Everything is so lovely. I lose myself in olive woods, always climbing up and up towards the pine woods above. And above the pines, there are the snow mountains that just show their white peaks above the dark hills. Oh, you poor dear, how I can ever make you understand what this place is like. You, whose poor, tired eyes have only the opposite side of Beresford Street. Sometimes I go no farther than the terrace in front of the hotel, which is a favorite lounging place with everybody. The gardens lie below, and the tennis courts where I sometimes play with a very nice girl, the only person in the hotel with whom I have made friends. She is a year older than I, and has come to Cap Ferrino with her brother, a doctor, or a medical student who is going to be a doctor. He passed his MB exam. At Edinburgh, just before they left home, Lotta told me. He came to Italy entirely on his sister's account. She had a troublesome chest attack last summer and was ordered to winter abroad. They are orphans, quite alone in the world, and so fond of each other. It is very nice for me to have such a friend as Lotta. She is so thoroughly respectable. I can't help using that word, for some of the girls in this hotel go in such a way that I know you would shudder at. Lotta was brought up by an aunt, deep down in the country, and knows hardly anything about life. Her brother won't allow her to read a novel, French or English, that he has not read and approved. He treats me like a child, she told me, but I don't mind, for it's nice to know somebody else loves me and cares about what I do, and even about my thoughts. Perhaps this is what makes some girls so eager to marry, the want of someone strong and brave and honest and true to care for them and order them about. I want no one, mother darling, for I have you, and you are all the world to me. No husband could ever come between us two. If I ever were to marry, he would have only the second place in my heart. But I don't suppose I ever shall marry, or even know what it is like to have an offer of marriage. No young man can afford to marry a penniless girl nowadays. Life is too expensive. Just more like, this is an interesting commentary. I think it's a bit much for her to attach so strongly to her mother, but perhaps after seeing what her father did, I can maybe slightly understand, but still, this is a red flag attachment case. Like, you like your mother way, way, way too much. Way too much. And also it feels like she's taunting her mother. Like, dang, girl. You don't gotta play up like how cool it is in Italy while your mom is languishing and will never see the life that is Italy. She's that girl who goes abroad and her whole worldview changes. And so, like, everything ever after this point is going to be referencing Italy. And if you haven't been to Italy, you just wouldn't understand. That's what our girl is. That's what our girl is. I don't think she's going to marry, but I don't think it's the fact that she's poor that's going to be the problem. Mr. Stafford, Lotta's brother, is very clever and very kind. He thinks it is rather hard for me to have to live with such an old woman as Lady Ducayne. But then he does not know how poor we are, you and I, and what a wonderful life this seems to me in this lovely place. I feel a selfish wretch for enjoying all my luxuries, while you, who want them so much more than I, have none of them. Hardly know what they are like. Do you, dearest? For my scamp of a father began to go at the dog soon after you were married. And since then, life has been all trouble and care and struggle for you. Holy shit, yeah, this daughter. Man. Okay. This letter was written when Bella had been less than a month at Cap Farino, before the novelty had worn off the landscape, and before the pleasure of luxurious surroundings had begun to cloy. She wrote to her mother every week, such long letters as girls who have lived in closest companionship with a mother alone can write, letters that are like a diary of heart and mind. She wrote gaily, always. But when the new year began, Mrs. Rolliston, thought she detected a note of melancholy under all those lively details about the place and the people. My poor girl is getting homesick, she thought. Her heart is in Beresford Street. It might be that she missed her new friend and companion, Lotta Stafford, who had gone with her brother for a little tour to Genoa and Spezia, and as far as Pisa. They were to return before February, but in the meantime, Bella might naturally feel very solitary among all those strangers, whose manners and doings she described so well. The mother's instinct had been true. Bella was not so happy as she had been in that first flush of wonder and delight which followed the change from Walworth to Riviera. Somehow, she knew not how, lassitude had crept upon her. She no longer loved to climb the hills, no longer flourished her orange stick in sheer gladness of her heart as her light feet skipped over the rough ground and the coarse grass on the mountainside. The odor of rosemary and thyme, the fresh breath of the sea, no longer filled her with rapture. She thought of Beresford Street and her mother's face with a sick longing. They were so far away. And she thought of Lady Ducayne, sitting by the heaped-up olive logs in the overheated salon, thought of that wizened nutcracker profile and those gleaming eyes with an invincible horror. Visitors at the hotel had told her that the air of Cap Farino was relaxing, better suited to age than to youth, to sickness than to health. No doubt it was so. She was not so ill as she had been at Walworth, but she told herself that she was suffering only from the pain of separation from her dear companion of her girlhood, the mother who had been nurse, sister, friend, flatterer, all things in this world to her. She had shed many tears over that parting, had spent many a melancholy hour on the marble terrace with yearning eyes looking westward, and with her heart's desire 1,000 miles away. Holy shit, this girl has problems. This girl has problems. She was sitting in her favorite spot, an angle at the eastern end of the terrace, a quiet little nook sheltered by orange trees, when she heard a couple of Riviera habitués talking in the garden below. They were sitting on a bench against the terrace wall. She had no idea of listening to their talk, till the sound of Lady Ducayne's name attracted her, and then she listened without any thought of wrongdoing. They were talking no secrets, just casually discussing a hotel acquaintance. They were two elderly people whom Bella knew only by sight. An English clergyman who had wintered abroad for half his lifetime. A stout, comfortable, well-to-do spinster whose chronic bronchitis obliged her to migrate annually. "I have met her about Italy for the last 10 years, said the lady, but I have never found out her real age. I put her down at 100, not a year less, replied the parson. Her reminiscences go all the way back to the Regency. She was evidently then in her zenith, and I have heard her say things that showed she was in Parisian society when the First Empire was at its best, before Josephine was divorced. She doesn't talk much now. No, there's not much life left in her. She is wise in keeping herself secluded. I only wonder that wicked old quack, her Italian doctor, didn't finish her off ages ago. I should think it must be the other way, and that he keeps her alive. My dear Miss Manders, do you think foreign quackery ever kept anybody alive? Well, there she is, and she never goes anywhere without him. Jan certainly has an unpleasant countenance. Unpleasant, echoed the parson. I don't believe the foul fiend himself can beat him in ugliness. I pity that poor young woman who has to live between old Lady Ducayne and Dr. Paravicini. But the old lady is very good to her companions. No doubt. She is very free with her cash. The servants call her good Lady Ducayne. She is a withered old female Croesus, and she'll never be able to get through her money, and doesn't relish the idea of other people enjoying it when she's in her coffin. People who live to be as old as she is become slavishly attached to life. I dare say she's generous to those poor girls, but she can't make them happy. They die in her service. Don't say they, Mr. Carton. I know that one poor girl died at Mentone last spring. Yes, and another poor girl died in Rome 3 years ago. I was there at the time. Good Lady Ducayne left her there in an English family. The girl had every comfort. The old woman was very liberal to her, but she died. I tell you, Miss Manders, it is not good for any young woman to live with two such horrors as Lady Ducayne and Paravicini. They talked of other things, but Bella hardly heard them. She sat motionless, and a cold wind seemed to come down upon her from the mountains and creep up to her from the sea, till she shivered as she sat there in the sunshine, with the shelter of orange trees in the midst of all that beauty and brightness. Yes, they were uncanny, certainly, the pair of them. She so like an aristocratic witch in her withered old age. He of no particular age, with a face that was more like a waxen mask than any human countenance Bella had seen. Let's see. Let's see. I lost my place. I looked away so I could have some tea, and then I lost my place. I'm gonna have another sip of tea in the meantime. What did it matter? Old age is venerable and worthy of all reverence. And Lady Ducayne had been very kind to her. Dr. Paravincini was a harmless, inoffensive student who seldom looked up from the book he was reading. He had his private sitting room where he made experiments in chemistry and natural science, perhaps in alchemy. What could it matter to Bella? He had always been polite to her, in his far-off way. She could not be more happily placed than she was, in her palatial hotel with this rich old lady. No doubt she missed the young English girl who had been so friendly, and it might be that she missed the girl's brother, for Mr. Stafford had talked to her a great deal, had interested himself in the books she was reading, and her manner of amusing herself when she was not on duty. Okay. You must come to our little salon when you are off, as the hospital nurses call it, and we can have some music. And no doubt you play and sing? Upon which Bella had to own with a blush of shame that she had forgotten how to play the piano years ago. Mother and I used to sing duets sometimes between the lights, without accompaniments, she said, and the tears came into her eyes as she thought of the humble room, the half-hour's respite from work, the sewing machine standing where a piano ought to have been, and her mother's plaintive voice, so sweet, so true, so dear. Sometimes she found herself wondering whether she would ever see that beloved mother again. Strange forebodings came into her mind. She was angry with herself for giving way to melancholy thoughts. One day, she questioned Lady Ducayne's French maid about those two companions who had died within 3 years. They were poor, feeble creatures, Francine told her. They looked fresh and bright enough when they came to Milady, but they ate too much, and they were lazy. They died of luxury and idleness. Milady was too kind to them. They had nothing to do, and so they took to fancying things, fancying the air didn't suit them, that they couldn't sleep. I sleep well enough, but I have had strange dreams several times since I have been in Italy. Ah, you had better not begin to think about dreams, or you will be like those other girls. They were dreamers, and they dreamt themselves into the cemetery. The dream troubled her a little, not because it was a ghastly or frightening dream, but on account of sensations which she had never felt before in sleep. A whirring of wheels that went round in her brain, a great noise like a whirlwind, but rhythmical like the ticking of a gigantic clock. And then, in the midst of this uproar, as of winds and waves, she seemed to sink into a gulf of unconsciousness, out of sleep into far deeper sleep. Total extinction. And then, after that black interval, there had come the sound of voices, and then again the whir of wheels, louder and louder, and again the black. And then she awoke, feeling languid and oppressed. She told Dr. Paravincini of her dream one day, on the only occasion when she wanted his professional advice. She had suffered rather severely from the mosquitoes before Christmas, and had been almost frightened at finding a wound upon her arm which she could only attribute to the venomous sting of one of those torturers. Paravincini put on his glasses and scrutinized the angry mark on the round, white arm, as Bella stood before him and Lady Ducayne with her sleeve rolled up above her elbow. Yes, that's rather more than a joke, he said. He has caught you on the top of a vein. What a vampire. But there's no harm done, signorita. Nothing that a little dressing of mine won't heal. You must always show me any bite of this nature. It might be dangerous if neglected. These creatures feed on poison and disseminate it. And to think such a tiny creature can bite like this, said Bella. My arm looks as if it had been cut with a knife. If I were to show you a mosquito sting under my microscope, you wouldn't be surprised at that, replied Paravincini. Bella had to put up with mosquito bites, even when they came on top of a vein, and produced that ugly wound. The wound recurred now and then at longish intervals, and Bella found Dr. Paravincini's dressing a speedy cure. If he were the quack his enemies called him, he had at least a light hand and a delicate touch in performing this small operation. More tea, more tea, more tea. How much more is there? How much more? It feels like I've been reading forever. So we've got about 12 pages left. 12 pages left. Bella Rolliston to Mrs. Rolliston, April 14th. Ever dearest, behold the check for my second quarter salary, £25. There is no one to pinch off a whole tenner for a year's commission as there was last time, so it is all for you, mother dear. I have plenty of pocket money in hands from the cash I brought away with me when you insisted on my keeping more than I wanted. It isn't possible to spend money here, except on occasional tips to servants, or sous to beggars and children, unless one has lots to spend, for everything one would like to buy. Tortoiseshell, coral, lace is so ridiculously dear that only a millionaire ought to look at it. Italy is a dream of beauty, but for shopping, give me Newington Causeway. You ask me so earnestly if I am quite well that my fear of my letters have been very dull lately. Yes, dear, I am well, but I am not so quite as strong as I was when I used to trudge to the West End to buy half a pound of tea, just for a constitutional walk, or to Dulwich to look at the pictures. Italy is relaxing, and I feel what the people here call slack. Okay. But I fancy I can see your dear face looking worried as you read this. Indeed, and indeed, I am not ill. I am only a little tired of this lovely scene, as I suppose one might get tired of looking at one of Turner's pictures of it, if it had been hung on a wall that was always opposite one. I think of you every hour and every day. Think of you in our homely little room, our dear little shabby parlor with the armchairs from the wreck of your old home, and Dick singing in his cage over the sewing machine. Dear, shrill, maddening Dick, who, we flattered ourselves, was so passionately fond of us. Do tell me in your next letter he is well. My friend Lotta and her brother never came back after all. They went from Pisa to Rome. Happy mortals, and there to be on the Italian lakes in May, which lake was not decided when Lotta last wrote to me. She had been a charming correspondent and has confided all of her little flirtations to me. We are all to go to Bellagio next week, by Genoa and Milan. Isn't that lovely? Lady Ducayne travels by the easiest stages, except when she is bottled up in the train deluxe. We shall stop 2 days at Genoa and 1 at Milan. What a bore I shall be to you with my talk about Italy when I come home. Love, and ever more love from your adoring Bella. I have to wonder, thinking about it. Just like, is Bella the Bella from the Twilight series? Was she named after this Bella? Was it a conscious decision, or was it just kind of happenstance? Was it happenstance? Herbert Stafford. Okay, this is 4. I should specify. This is 4. This is a new section. Herbert Stafford and his sister had often talked of the pretty English girl with a fresh complexion, which made such a pleasant touch of rosy color amongst all those sallow faces at the Grand Hotel. The young doctor had thought of her with a compassionate tenderness. Her utter loneliness in that great hotel where there were so many people, her bondage to that old, old woman, where everybody else was free to think of nothing but enjoying life. It was a hard fate, and the poor child was evidently devoted to her mother, and felt the pain of separation. Only 2 of them, and very poor, with and all the world to each other, he thought. Give me a second. Lotta told him one morning that they were to meet again at Bellagio. The old thing and her court are to be there before we are, she said. I shall be charmed to have Bella again. She is so bright and gay, in spite of an occasional touch of homesickness. I never took to a girl in such short acquaintance as I did to her. I like I like her best when she is homesick, said Herbert, for then I am sure she has a heart. And then I'm sure she has a heart. That almost wasn't. That was almost a really bad sh to add to the beginning of that word. Okay, stretch. Okay. Thank you for the headbutt. And hello, remove. Hello, arc. Let's see. Oh, sure, she has a heart, and then that was a clear cut to a next page. It's kind of a case of like, am I happier when there's a break in the line, or like a break in a sentence when it comes to flipping pages? Because otherwise it gets a little awkward. Okay. What do you have to do with hearts except for dissection? Don't forget that Bella is an absolute pauper. She told me in confidence that her mother makes mantles for a West End shop. You can hardly have a lower depth than that. Sorry, I hear a rhythmic crying. Okay, he's giving up. But it's at a distance. It's the kind of cry that he would have. And I don't know if it's just my cat. It's probably not just him that does this. Sometimes when he wakes up, he seems like confused and a little sad and scared, and he starts crying this most pitiful thing. And it usually stops when he sees me. So it's kind of like you want your big protector. You want your big protector. Is that it? So it just sounded like that kind of cry that he's looking for. Okay. He's coming closer. It's like echolocation. It's like echolocation. Okay. I'm gonna be right back so I can check on him. Needy cat overload. Needy cat overload. Hey. Now what? You're in here. You're in the room. Come on. I could probably pick him up and put him back on the desk, but I don't know if I want to. It's rather difficult to read with him in my arms. At least this book. It might be due to the size of the book. Like maybe if it were a little bigger or a little smaller. Oh, what are you giving me that look for? What are you giving me that look for? Okay. I shouldn't think any less of her if her mother made matchboxes. Not in the abstract, of course not. Matchboxes are honest labor. But you couldn't marry a girl whose mother makes mantles. We haven't come to the consideration of that question yet, answered Herbert, who liked to provoke his sister. In 2 years' hospital practice, he had seen too much of the grim realities of life to retain any prejudices about rank. Cancer, phthisis, gangrene leave a man with little respect for humanity. The Colonel is always the same, fearfully and wonderfully made, a subject for pity and terror. Just thinking a little bit here, like, so he is kind of interested in our heroine Bella, and the sister's like, no, she's too poor, and he's like, whatever, doesn't matter, she's sweet. And I don't think Bella would even think about it because, he's going to be a doctor, and she's like a penniless girl. His mother makes mantles. All I can think of is so her mom makes basically cloaks. Is that really such a bad thing? Oh, he's come up. He's come up to be a menace. A menace. Come on. Come here. Hey, Mr. Cat. What are your marriage prospects? Are you just gonna be like a bachelor until you're a bachelor for another 20 years? Bachelor life? Live with your mother? Good boy. Mr. Stafford and his sister arrived at Bellagio in a fair May evening. The sun was going down as the steamer approached the pier, and all that glory of purple bloom which curtains every wall at this season of the year flushed and deepened in the glowing light. A group of ladies were standing on the pier watching the arrivals, and among them Herbert saw a pale face that startled him out of his wonted composure. "There she is," murmured Lotta at his elbow. "But how dreadfully changed. She looks a wreck." They were shaking hands with her a few minutes later, and a flush had lighted up her poor pinched face in the pleasure of meeting. "I thought you might come this evening," she said. "We have been here a week." She did not add that she had been there every evening to watch the boat in, and a good many times during the day. The Grande Bretagne was close by, and it had been easy for her to creep to the pier when the boat bell rang. She felt a joy in meeting these people again, a sense of being with friends, a confidence which Lady Ducayne's goodness had never inspired in her. "Oh, you poor darling, how awfully ill you must have been," exclaimed Lotta as the two girls embraced. Bella tried to answer, but her voice was choked with tears. What's been the matter, dear? That horrid influenza, I suppose?" No, I have not been ill. I've only felt a little weaker than I used to be. I don't think the air of Cap Farino quite agreed with me." "It must have disagreed with you abominably. I never saw such a change in anyone. Do let Herbert doctor you. He is fully qualified, you know. He prescribed for ever so many influenza patients at the laundress. They were glad to get advice from an English doctor in a friendly way." "I am sure he must be very clever," faltered Bella, "but there is really nothing the matter. I am not ill, and if I were ill, Lady Ducayne's physician—" "That dreadful man with the yellow face? I would as soon take one of the Borgias prescribed for me. I hope you haven't been taking any of his medicines." "No, dear, I have taken nothing. I have never complained of being ill." This was said while they were all three walking to the hotel. The Staffords' rooms had been secured in advance, pretty ground floor rooms opening into the garden. Lady Ducayne's statelier apartments were on the floor above. "I believe these rooms are just under ours," said Bella. "Then it will be all the easier for you to run down to us," replied Lotta, which was not really the case, as the grand staircase was in the center of the hotel. Oh, hotel layouts are awful sometimes. Yes, it should be really easy. No, it's not. But I suppose it's better than, say, like a cruise ship. Staircase lines. Those are mazes. "Oh, I shall find it easy enough," said Bella. "I'm afraid you'll have too much of my society. Lady Ducayne sleeps away half the day in this warm weather, so I have a good deal of idle time. I get awfully moped thinking of mother and home." Her voice broke upon the last word. She could not have thought of that poor lodging which went by the name of home more tenderly had it been the most beautiful that art and wealth ever created. She moped and pined in this lovely garden, with the sunlit lake and the romantic hills spreading out their beauty before her. She was homesick, and she had dreams, or rather, an occasional reoccurrence of that one bad dream with all its strange sensations. It was more like a hallucination than dreaming. The whirring of wheels, the sinking into an abyss, the struggling back into consciousness. She had the dream shortly before she left Cap Farino, but not since she had come to Bellagio, and she began to hope the air in this Lake District suited her better, and that those strange sensations would never return. Mr. Stafford wrote a prescription and had it made up at the chemist near the hotel. It was a powerful tonic, and after 2 bottles and a row or 2 on the lake, and some rambling over the hills and in the meadows where the spring flowers made earth seem paradise, Bella's spirits and looks improved as if by magic. "It is a wonderful tonic," she said, but perhaps, in her heart of hearts, she knew that the doctor's kind voice, and the friendly hand that helped her in and out of the boat, and the lake, had something to do with her cure. She has a crush. She has a crush. "I hope you don't forget that her mother makes mantles," Lotta said warningly. "Or matchboxes. It is just the same thing, so far as I am concerned." "You mean that in no circumstances could you think of marrying her?" "I mean that if I ever love a woman well enough to think of marrying her, riches or ranks will count for nothing with me. But I fear your poor friend may not live to be any man's wife." "Do you think her so very ill?" He sighed and left the question unanswered. Why are you looking so mad? Because I'm not paying enough attention to you, is it? There we go. Now you look a little cheery. A little bit more cheery. Okay. One day, while they were gathering wild hyacinths in an upland meadow, Bella told Mr. Stafford about her bad dream. "It is curious only because it is hardly like a dream," she said. "I dare say you could find some common sense reason for it. The position of my head on my pillow, or the atmosphere, or something." And then she described her sensations, how in the midst of sleep there came a sudden sense of suffocation, and then those whirring wheels, so loud, so terrible, and then a blank, and then a coming back into waking consciousness. "Have you ever had chloroform given to you? By a dentist, for instance?" "Never. Dr. Paravicini asked me that question one day." "Lately?" "No, long ago, when we were in the train deluxe." "Has Dr. Paravicini prescribed for you since you began to feel weak and ill?" "Oh, he has given me a tonic from time to time, but I hate medicine and took very little of the stuff. And then I am not ill, only weaker than I used to be. I was ridiculously strong and well when I lived at Walworth, and used to take long walks every day. Mother made me take those tramps to Dulwich or Norwood, for fear that I should suffer too much from sewing machine. Sometimes, but very seldom, she went with me. She was generally toiling at home while I was enjoying fresh air and exercise, and she was very careful about our food, that, however plain it was, it should be always nourishing and ample. I owe it to her care that I grew up such a great, strong creature." "You don't look great or strong now, you poor dear," said Lotta. "Hello, Nollyuki. I'm doing fine. I have a guest with me who's slightly interrupting, but as long as I keep the pets rolling, he doesn't seem to mind too much." What? Oh. Sorry, he's burrowing again. It's like, someone brought up something about like an ostrich, like hiding their head in the ground. He's doing exactly that right now. Hiding in my arms. Like, what's the point? Your head is like an eighth of your body. Are you thinking, is it warm? Is it warm? Or is it more like, ah, yes, I am hidden. Even though the bulk of my body is outside of this nook, I am hidden from all scary things, like the good Lady Ducayne. Hey. What are you doing? You could purr into the microphone. Okay. He's not going to purr into the microphone anymore. He's on the wrong side. I'm afraid Italy doesn't agree with me. Perhaps it is not Italy, but being cooped up with Lady Ducayne that has made you ill. But I am never cooped up. Lady Ducayne is absurdly kind, and lets me roam about or sit in the balcony all day if I like. I have read more novels since I have been with her than in all the rest of my life. Then she is very different from the average old lady, who is usually a slave driver, said Stafford. I wonder why she carries a companion about with her if she has so little need of society. Oh, I am only part of her state. She is inordinately rich, and the salary she gives me doesn't count. Apropos of Dr. Parravicini, I know he is a clever doctor, for he cures my horrid mosquito bites. A little ammonia would do that in the early stage of mischief, but there are no mosquitoes to trouble you now. Oh, yes there are. I had a bite just before we left Cap Farino. She pushed her loose lawn sleeve and exhibited a scar, which he scrutinized intently with a surprised and puzzled look. This is no mosquito bite, he said. Oh, yes, it is, unless there are snakes or adders at Cap Farino. It is not a bite at all. You are trifling with me. Miss Rolliston, you have allowed that wretched Italian quack to bleed you. They have killed the greatest man in modern Europe that way, remember. How very foolish of you. I was never bled in my life, Mr. Stafford. Nonsense. Let me look at your other arm. Are there any more mosquito bites? Yes. Dr. Parravicini says I have bad skin for healing, and that the poison acts more virulently with me than with most people. Stafford examined both of her arms in the broad sunlight, scars new and old. You have been very badly bitten, Miss Rolliston, he said, and if I ever find a mosquito, I shall make him smart. But now tell me, my dear girl, on your word of honor, tell me as you would tell a friend who is sincerely anxious for your health and happiness, as you would tell your mother if she were here to question you. Have you no knowledge of any cause for these scars except mosquito bites? No suspicion, even? No, indeed. No, upon my honor. I have never seen a mosquito biting my arm. One never does see the horrid little fiends. But I've heard them trumpering under the curtains, and I know that I have often had one of the pestilent wretches buzzing about me. Later in the day, Bella and her friends were sitting at tea in the garden, while Lady Ducayne took her afternoon drive with her doctor. How long do you mean to stop with Lady Ducayne, Miss Rolliston? Herbert Stafford asked, after a thoughtful silence, breaking suddenly upon the trivial talk of the two girls. Hello, piano riff. Enjoy your time with your family. Enjoy your time with your family. We are reading The Good Lady Ducayne, which has just a few scant pages left. We are nearing the end. Will she live or will she die? Taking all bets. Will she live or will she die? He's curled up now. He's curled up now. Okay. As long as she will go on paying me £25 a quarter. Even if you feel your health breaking down in her service. It is not the service that has injured my health. You can see that I really have nothing to do. To read aloud for an hour or so once or twice a week. To write a letter once in a while to a London tradesman. I shall never have such an easy time with anybody. And nobody else would give me 100 a year. Then you mean to go on till you break down, to die at your post? Like the other two companions? No. If I ever feel seriously ill, really ill, I shall put myself in a train and go back to Walworth without stopping. What about the other two companions? They both died. It was very unlucky for Lady Ducayne. That's why she engaged me. She chose me because I was ruddy and robust. She must feel rather disgusted at my having grown white and weak. By the by, when I told her about good about the good that your tonic had done me. She said that she would like to see you and have a little talk with you about her own case. And I should like to see Lady Ducayne. When did she say this? The day before yesterday. Will you ask her if she will see me this evening? With pleasure. I wonder what you will think of her. She looks rather terrible to a stranger, but Dr. Paramancini said that she was once a famous beauty. Hello, Dirk. How are you? It was nearly 10 o'clock when Mr. Stafford was summoned by message from Lady Ducayne, whose courier came to conduct him to her ladyship's salon. Bella was reading aloud when the visitor was admitted, and he noticed the languor in the low, sweet tones, the evident effort. Shut up. Sorry, trying to find the old lady voice again. Thinking about what I was using for a reference point. Shut up the book, said the querulous old voice. You are beginning to drawl like Miss Blandy. Stafford saw a small bent figure crouching over the piled up olive logs, a shrunken old figure in a gorgeous garment of black and crimson brocade, a skinny throat emerging from a mass of old Venetian lace, clasped with diamonds that flashed like fireflies at the trembling old head turned toward him. The eyes that looked at him out of the face were almost as bright as the diamonds, the only living feature in that narrow parchment mask. He had seen terrible faces in the hospital, faces on which disease had set dreadful marks, but he had never seen a face that impressed him so painfully as this, with that withered countenance, with this indescribable horror of death outlived, a face that should have been hidden under a coffin lid years and years ago. The Italian physician was standing on the other side of the fireplace, smoking a cigarette, and looking down at the little old woman brooding over the hearth, as if he were proud of her. Also, the cat is on the keyboard, but he's happy, so I don't want to move him. So if you notice something strange, let me know. He's actually, he's got his hand on the number pad. I say hand. He's got his paw on the number pad, and he's starting to, twitch as if he's dreaming. And I don't want to wake him like a mosquito bite. I don't want to wake him. Let sleeping cats lie. Good evening, Mr. Stafford. You can go to your room, Bella, and write your everlasting letter to your mother at Walworth. Oh, that was the wrong person, said Lady Ducayne. I believe she writes a page about every wildflower she discovers in the woods and meadows. I don't know what else she can find to write about, she added, as Bella quietly withdrew to the pretty little bedroom opening out of Lady Ducayne's spacious apartment. Here, as at Cap Farino, she slept in a room adjoining the old lady's. You are a medical man, I understand, Mr. Stafford. I'm a qualified practitioner, but I have not begun to practice. You have begun upon my companion, she tells me. I have prescribed for her, certainly, and I am happy to find my prescription has done her good, but I look upon that improvement as temporary. Her case will require more drastic treatment. Never mind her case. There's nothing the matter with the girl. Absolutely nothing, except girlish nonsense. Too much liberty and not enough work. I understand that 2 of your ladyship's previous companions died of the same disease, said Stafford, looking first at Lady Ducayne, who gave her tremulous old head an impatient jerk, and then at Paramancini, whose yellow complexion had paled a little under Stafford's scrutiny. Don't bother me about my companions, sir, said Lady Ducayne. I sent for you to consult you about myself, not about a parcel of anemic girls. You are young, and medicine is a progressive science, the newspapers tell me. Where have you studied? In Edinburgh and in Paris. 2 good schools, and I know all the newfangled theories, the modern discoveries. That reminds one of the medieval witchcraft, of Albertus Magnus and George Ripley. You have studied hypnotism, electricity, and the transfusion of blood, said Stafford very slowly, looking at Parravicini. Have you made any discovery that teaches you to prolong human life? Any elixir? Any mode of treatment? I want my life prolonged, young man. That man there has been my physician for 30 years. He does all he can to keep me alive, after his lights. He studies all the new theories of all the scientists, but he is old, and he gets older every day. His brain power is going. He is bigoted, prejudiced, can't receive new ideas, can't grapple with new systems. He will let me die if I am not on my guard against him. You are of an unbelievable ingratitude, Eclensa, said Parravicini. Oh, you needn't complain. I have paid you thousands to keep me alive. Every year of my life has swollen your hoards. You know there is nothing to come to you when I am gone. My whole fortune is left to endow a home for indignant women of quality who have reached their 90th year. Come, Mr. Stafford, I am a rich woman. Give me a few years more in the sunshine, a few years more above ground, and I will give you the price of a fashionable London practice. I will set you up at the West End. How old are you, Lady Ducayne? I was born the day Louis XVI was guillotined. Then I think you have had your share of the sunshine and the pleasures of the earth, and that you should spend your few remaining days in repenting your sins and trying to make atonement for the young lives that have been sacrificed to your love of life. What do you mean by that, sir? Oh, Lady Ducayne, need I put your wickedness and your physician's still greater wickedness in plain words? The poor girl who is now in your employment has been reduced from robust health to a condition of absolute danger by Dr. Parravicini's experimental surgery, and I have no doubt whose other 2 young women who broke down in your service were treated by him in the same manner. I could take upon myself to demonstrate, by most convincing evidence, to a jury of medical men, that Dr. Parravicini has been bleeding Miss Rolliston after putting her under chloroform at intervals ever since she's been in your service. The deterioration in the girl's health speaks for itself. The lancet marks upon the girl's arms are unmistakable, and her description of a series of sensations, which she calls a dream, points unmistakably to the administration of chloroform when she was sleeping. A practice so nefarious, so murderous, must, if exposed, result in a sentence only less severe than the punishment of a murder. I laugh, said Parravicini, with an airy motion of his skinny fingers. I laugh at once at your theories and at your threats. I, Parravicini Leopold, have no fear that the law can question anything I have done. Take the girl away, and let me hear no more of her, cried Lady Ducayne in the thin, old voice, which so poorly matched the energy and fire of the wicked old brain that guided its utterances. Let her go back to her mother. I want more girls. I want no more girls to die in my service. There are girls enough to spare in the world, God knows. Okay. Let me check. He is. I'm trying to figure out, like, does the cat want out? Does he want out or want in? If you ever engage another companion, or take another English girl into your service, Lady Ducayne, I will make all England ring with the story of your wickedness. I want no more girls. I don't believe in his experiments. They have been full of danger for me as well for the girl. An air bubble, and I should be gone. I'll have no more of his dangerous quackery. I'll find some new man, a better man than you, sir, a discoverer like Pasteur or Virchow, a genius to keep me alive. Take your girl away, young man. Marry her if you'd like. I'll write a check for £1,000 and let her go and live on beef and beer and get strong and plump again. I'll have no more such experiments. Do you hear, Parravicini? She screamed vindictively, the yellowed, wrinkled face distorted with fury, the eyes glaring at him. The Staffords carried Bella Rolleston off to Varese next day. She very loath to leave Lady Ducayne, whose liberal salary afforded such help for the dear mother. Herbert Stafford insisted, however, treating Bella as coolly as if he had been the family physician, and she had been given over wholly to his care. Do you suppose your mother would let you stop here to die? He asked. If Mrs. Rolleston knew how ill you are, she would come post-haste to fetch you. I shall never be well again till I get back to Walworth, answered Bella, who was low-spirited and inclined to tears this morning, a reaction after her good spirits of yesterday. Okay, I have a cat who's going to cry so loud. I'm going to let him out. There was a standoff. Okay. Let me check. We'll try a week or two at Varese first, said Stafford. When you can walk halfway up Mount Generoso without palpitation of the heart, you shall go back to Walworth. Poor mother, how glad she will be to see me, and how sorry that I've lost such a good place. This conversation took place on the boat when they were leaving Bellagio. Lotta had gone to her friend's room at 7 o'clock that morning, long before Lady Ducayne's withered eyelids had opened to the daylight, before even Francine, the French maid, was astir, and had helped to pack a Gladstone bag with essentials, and hustled Bella downstairs and out the doors before she could make any strenuous resistance. It's all right, Lotta assured her. Herbert had a good talk with Lady Ducayne last night, and it was settled for you to leave this morning. She doesn't like invalids, you see. No, sighed Bella, she doesn't like invalids. It was very unlucky that I should break down, just like Miss Thompson and Miss Blandy. At any rate, you are not dead, like them, answered Lotta, and my brother says you are not going to die. It seemed rather a dreadful thing to be dismissed in that offhand way, without a word of farewell from her employer. I wonder what Miss Torpenter will say when I go to her for another situation, Bella speculated ruefully, while she and her friends were breakfasting on board the steamer. Perhaps you may never want another situation, said Stafford. You mean that I may never be well enough to be useful to anybody? No, I don't mean anything of the kind. It was after dinner at Varese, when Bella had been induced to take a whole glass of Chianti, and quite sparkled after that unaccustomed stimulant, that Mr. Stafford produced a letter from his pocket. I forgot to give you Lady Ducayne's letter of adieu, he said. What, did she write to me? I am so glad. I hated to leave her in such a cool way. For after all, she was very kind to me. If I didn't like her, it was only because she was too dreadfully old. Wow, not liking someone because they're old? Dang. That's yeah, she's a bitch. She tore open the envelope. The letter was short and to the point. Goodbye, child. Go and marry your doctor. I enclose a farewell gift for your trousseau. Adeline Ducayne. £100. A whole year's salary. No. Why? It's a check for 1,000, cried Bella. What a generous old soul. She really is the dearest old thing. She just missed being very dear to you, Bella, said Stafford. He had dropped into the use of her Christian name while they were on board the boat. It seemed natural now that she was to be in his charge till they all three went back to England. I shall take it upon myself the privileges of an elder brother till we land at Dover, he said. After that, well, it must be as you please. The question of their future relations must have been satisfactorily settled before they crossed the Channel, for Bella's next letter to her mother communicated 3 startling facts. First, that the enclosed cheque for £1,000 was to be invested in debenture stock in Mrs. Rowlandson's name, and was to be her very own income and principal for the rest of her life. Next, that Bella was going home to Walworth immediately. And last, that she was going to be married to Mr. Herbert Stafford in the following autumn. And I am sure that you will adore him, Mother, as much as I do, wrote Bella. It is all good, Lady Ducayne's doing. I never could have married if I had not secured that little nest egg for you. Herbert says we shall be able to add to it as years go by, and that wherever we live there shall always be a room in our house for you. The word mother-in-law has no terrors for him. Herbert's made a huge mistake. That's the end of the book. This is the end of the story of the good Lady Ducayne. And just thinking like, man, Herbert, bro, no, you shouldn't be doing that. You're a very kind guy, but no, don't do it. It's too late though. It's too late. It's too late. It's been years and years and years past. Okay, with that, we are done with the good Lady Ducayne, and I actually am going to take a quick break so I can refresh my tea. I will see you, and we will be back with Carmilla after this. Carmilla, which, thinking like, okay, so the previous story still had a female vampire feeding on like a female victim-ish, but like with the addition of like, oh, the science of it. Someone's drawing out her blood for her, versus Carmilla, which I think is a bit more straightforward in terms of its romantic overtones, or so I've heard. Maybe romance is not quite the right word for what happens with vampires, but we'll figure it out as we go along. So I will be back. Okay, now I'm back. I made another mistake. I do this all the time in between. Like, well, I'm just gonna make some tea, and it takes a little bit for it to heat up, right? So I'm just going to have a quick peck at something, and what do I spy? Like, right, those Pringles. Those Pringles still can't be that bad, right? In terms of spice, as a quick snack. Breathing fire. Breathing fire. My mouth is aflame. But I don't really want to have anything that will, like, coat the fire out, because I want to do some singing practice later. And I feel like, you know, drinking milk is a bad idea for that, right? They weren't that. They're bad. They're horrible. Okay. Posture check and stretch. I missed that. Wow, my mouth. Okay. No, they were horrible. It was really spicy. Like tears welling up. Spicy. Okay. So we finished Good Lady Ducayne, and now we're going to go back earlier in the book to Carmilla, which is going to be probably the last short story. I call it a short story, but it's kind of a case of like, well, how many pages is a short story? Like 60 pages? That's fine. Good Lady Ducayne was about 25. And it took this long. We'll see how far we can get into Carmilla. Which was published in 1871. So, I guess this is like, I don't want to say it's gothic romance, because I don't really know if it's, again, how much romance exactly is in here. How much romance can there be? But we have it. Carmilla. Prologue. Upon a paper attached to the narrative which follows, Dr. Hesselius has written a rather elaborate note, which he accompanies with a reference to his essay on the strange subject which the manuscript illuminates. This mysterious subject he treats in the essay with his usual learning and acumen, and with remarkable directness and condensation. It will form but one volume of the series that extraordinary man's collected papers. As I publish the case in this volume, simply to interest the laity, L-A-I-T-Y, sorry, just clarifying, I don't know what a laity is. I shall in no way forestall the intelligent lady who relates it. And, after due consideration, I have determined, therefore, to abstain from presenting any précis of the learned doctor's reasoning, or extract from his statement on a subject which he describes as involving, not improbably, some of the profoundest arcana of our dual existence and its intermediates. I was anxious, on discovering this paper, to reopen the correspondence commenced by Dr. Hesselius so many years before, with a person so clever and careful as his informant seems to have been. Much to my regret, however, I found that she had died in the interval. She probably could have added little to the narrative which she communicates in the following pages, with, so far as I can pronounce, such a conscientious peculiarity. 1. An early fright. Although we are by no means magnificent people, we inhabit a schloss, a castle in Styria. A small income in that part of the world goes a long way. 800 or 900 a year does wonders. Scantily enough, ours would have answered among wealthy people at the time. My father is English, and I bear an English name, although I never saw England. But here, in this lonely and primitive place, where everything is so marvelously cheap, I really don't see how so much more money would at all materially add to our comforts, or even luxuries. My father was in the Austrian service, and retired upon a pension and his patrimony, and purchased this feudal residence, and the small estate on which it stands, a bargain. I have to stop something. They were fighting. They were fighting. They will never be happy. They will never, ever be happy. Nothing can be more picturesque or solitary. It stands on a slight eminence in a forest. The road, very old and narrow, passes in front of its drawbridge, never raised in my time, and its moat, stocked with perch, sailed over by many swans, and floated on its surface white fleets of water lilies. Over all this, the Schloss shows its many-windowed front, in towers, and its Gothic chapel. The forest opens in an irregular and very picturesque glade before its gate, and at the right, a steep Gothic bridge carries the road over a stream that winds in deep shadow through the wood. I have said that this is a very lonely place. Judge whether I say truth. Looking from the hall door toward the road, the forest in which our castle stands extends 15 miles to the right and 12 to the left. The nearest inhabited village is about 7 of your English miles to the left. The nearest inhabited Schloss of any historic associations is that of that old General Spielsdorf, nearly 20 miles away to the right. I have said the nearest inhabited village because there is, only 3 miles westward, that is to say, in the direction of the General Spielsdorf's Schloss, a ruined village, with its quaint little church, now roofless, in the aisle of which there are mouldering tombs of the proud family of Karstein, now extinct, who once owned the equally desolate chateau which, in the thick of the forest, overlooks the silent ruins of the town. Respecting the cause of the desertion of this striking and melancholy spot, there is a legend which I shall relate to you another time. I must tell you now how very small is the party who constitute the inhabitants of our castle. I don't include servants or those dependents who occupy rooms in the buildings attached to the Schloss. Listen and wonder. My father, who is the kindest man on earth, but growing old, and I, at the date of my story, only 19. 8 years have passed since then. I and my father constituted the family at the Schloss. My mother, a Styrian lady, died in my infancy. But I had a good-natured governess who had been with me from, I may almost say, my infancy. I cannot remember the time when her fat, benignant face was not a familiar picture in my memory. This was Madame Pardon, a native of Bern, whose care and good nature in part supplied to me the loss of my mother, whom I do not even remember. So early did I lose her. She made a third of our little dinner party. There was a fourth, Mademoiselle de la Fontaine, a lady, as you term, I believe, a finishing governess. She spoke French and German, Madame Pardon French and broken English, to which my father and I added English, which, partly from patriotic motives, we spoke every day. The consequence was a babble at which strangers used to laugh, and which I shall make no attempt to reproduce in this narrative. And there were 2 or 3 young lady friends besides, pretty, nearly all my own age, who were occasional visitors, for longer or shorter terms, and these visits I sometimes returned. These were our regular social resources, but of course there were chance visits from neighbors of only 5 or 6 leagues distance. My life was, notwithstanding, rather a solitary one, I can assure you. My elders had just so much control over me as you might conjecture such sage persons would have in the case of a rather spoiled girl, whose only parent allowed her pretty nearly her own way in everything. Just thinking here, this is, well, I want to say, it feels like a lot of these stories have missing parents, whether it be the father who deserted them or the mother who died when the child was very young, which is why they fall prey to probably the vampire. At least in the case of the missing mothers. No one to warn them. Stay away from strangers. Although in this case it's a girl, so nothing wrong with that, right? Nothing to be afraid of. The first occurrence in my existence which produced a terrible impression upon my mind, which, in fact, never has been effaced, was one of the very earliest incidents of my life which I can recollect. Some people will think it so trifling that it should not be recorded here. You'll see, however, by and by, why I mention it. The nursery, as it was called, though I had it all to myself, was a large room in the upper story of the castle, with a steep oak roof. I can't have been more than 6 years old, when one night I awoke, and looking round the room for my bed, failed to see the nursery maid. Neither was my nurse there, and I thought myself alone. I was not frightened, for I was one of those happy children who are studiously kept in ignorance of ghost stories, of fairy tales, and of all such lore as makes us cover up our own heads when the door creaks suddenly, or the flicker of an expiring candle makes the shadow of a bedpost dance upon the wall, near our faces. I was vexed and insulted at finding myself, as I conceived, neglected, and I began to whimper, preparatory to a hearty bout of roaring, when to my surprise, I saw a solemn but very pretty face looking at me from the side of the bed. It was that of a young lady who was kneeling with her hands under the coverlet. I looked at her with a kind of pleased wonder and ceased whimpering. She caressed me with her hands and lay down beside me on the bed and drew me toward her, smiling. I felt immediately delightfully soothed and fell asleep again. I was wakened by a sensation as if 2 needles ran into my breast very deep at the same moment, and I cried loudly. The lady started back, with her eyes fixed on me, and then slipped down upon the floor and, as I thought, hid herself under the bed. I was now, for the first time, frightened, and I yelled with all my might and main. Nurse, nursery maid, housekeeper, all came running in, and hearing my story, they made light of it, soothing me all they could meanwhile. But, child as I was, I could perceive that their faces were pale with an unwonted look of anxiety, and I saw them look under the bed and about the room, and peep under the tables and pluck open cupboards, and the housekeeper whispered to the nurse, "Lay your hand in that hollow in the bed. Someone did lie there, so sure as you did not. The place is still warm." I remember the nursery maid petting me, and all 3 examined my chest, where I told them I felt a puncture, and pronouncing that there was no sign visible that any such thing had happened to me. The housekeeper and the 2 other servants who were in charge of the nursery remained sitting up all night, and from that time a servant always sat up in the nursery until I was about 14. I was very nervous for a long time after this. A doctor was called in. He was pallid and elderly. How well I remember his long, saturnine face, slightly pitted with smallpox, and his chestnut wig. For a good while, every second day, he came and gave me medicine, which of course I hated. The morning after I saw this apparition, I was in a state of terror and could not bear to be left alone, daylight though it was, for a moment. I remember my father coming up and standing at the bedside and talking cheerfully and asking a nurse a number of questions and laughing very heartily at one of the answers and patting me on the shoulder and kissing me and telling me not to be frightened, that it was nothing but a dream and could not hurt me. But I was not comforted, for I knew that the visit of the strange woman was not a dream, and I was awfully frightened. I was a little consoled by the nursery maids assuring me that it was she who had come and looked at me, and lain down beside me in the bed, and that I must have been half dreaming to not have known her face. But this, though supported by the nurse, did not quite satisfy me. Hold on a second. Let's see. Okay, just making sure. So the adults do know that there was something fucked up happening, but they're covering up for the sake of the child. They're covering it up. I remember, in the course of that day, a venerable old man in a black cassock coming into the room with a nurse and housekeeper, and talking a little to them, and very kindly to me. His face was very sweet and gentle, and he told me they were going to pray, and joined my hands together, and desired me to say, softly, while they were praying, "Lord, hear all good prayers for us, for Jesus' sake." I think these were the very words, for I often repeated them to myself, and my nurse used to, for years, make me say them in my prayers. I remember so well the thoughtful sweet face of that white-haired old man in his black cassock as he stood in that rude, lofty brown room, with the clumsy furniture of a fashion 300 years old about him, and the scanty light entering its shadowy atmosphere through the small lattice. He kneeled, and the 3 women with him, and he prayed aloud with an earnest, quavering voice for, what appeared to me, a long time. I forgot all my life preceding that event, and for some time after it is all obscure also. But the scenes I've just described stand out as vivid as the isolated pictures of the phantasmagoria surrounded by darkness. 2. Guest. I am now going to tell you something so strange that will require all of your faith in my veracity to believe my story. It is not only true, nevertheless, but a truth of which I have been eyewitness. It was a sweet summer evening, and my father asked me, as he sometimes did, to take a little ramble with him along that beautiful forest vista which I have mentioned as lying in front of the Schloss. General Spielsdorf cannot come to us so soon as I had hoped, said my father, as we pursued our walk. He was to have paid us a visit of some weeks, and we had expected his arrival next day. He was to have brought with him a young lady, his niece and ward, Mademoiselle Rheinfeldt, whom I had never seen, but whom I had heard described as a very charming girl, and in whose society I had promised myself many happy days. I was more disappointed that a young lady living in a town or a bustling neighborhood can possibly imagine. This visit and the new acquaintance it promised have furnished my daydream for many weeks. Give me a second to clear my throat. Okay. And how soon does he come? I asked. Not till autumn, not for 2 days, I dare say, he answered. And I am very glad now, dear, that you have never known Mademoiselle Rheinfeldt. And why? I asked, both mortified and curious. Because the poor young lady is dead, he replied. I quite forgot I had not told you, but you were not in the room when I received the General's letter this evening. I was very much shocked. General Spielsdorf had mentioned in his first letter, 6 or 7 weeks before, that she was not so well as he would have wished for her. But there was nothing to suggest the remotest suspicion of danger. Okay. Let's see. Here is the General's letter, he said, handing it to me. I am afraid he is in great affliction. The letter appears to me to have been very nearly in distraction. We sat down on a rude bench under a group of magnificent lime trees. The sun was setting with all its melancholy splendor behind the sylvan horizon, and the stream that flows beside our home and passes under the steep old bridge I have mentioned wound through many a group of noble trees, almost at our feet, reflecting in its current the fading crimson of the sky. General Spielsdorf's letter was so extraordinary, so vehement, and in some places so self-contradictory, that I read it twice over, the second time aloud to my father, and was still unable to account for it, except by supposing that grief had unsettled his mind. It said, I have lost my dear daughter, for as such I loved her. During the last days of dear Bertha's illness, I was not able to write to you. Before then, I had no idea of her danger. I have lost her, and now learn all too late. She died in the peace of innocence, and in the glorious hope of a blessed futurity. The fiend who betrayed her infatuated hospitality has done it all. I thought I was receiving into my house innocence, gaiety, a charming companion for my lost Bertha. Heavens, what a fool I have been. I thank God my child died without a suspicion of the cause of her sufferings. She has gone without so much as conjecturing the nature of her illness, and the accursed passion of the agents of all this misery. I devote my remaining days to tracking and extinguishing a monster. I am told I may hope to accomplish my righteous and merciful purpose. At present, there is scarcely a gleam of light to guide me. I curse my conceited incredulity, my despicable affectation of superiority, my blindness, my obstinacy. All too late. I cannot write or talk collectedly now. I am distracted. So soon as I shall have a little recovered, I mean to devote myself for a time to enquiry, which may possibly lead me as far as Vienna. Sometime in the autumn, 2 months hence, or earlier if I live, I will see you. That is, if you permit me. I will then tell you all that I scarce dare put upon paper now. Farewell. Pray for me, dear friend. In these terms ended this strange letter. Though I had never seen Bertha Reinfeldt, my eyes filled with tears at the sudden intelligence. I was startled, as well as profoundly disappointed. The sun had now set, and it was twilight by the time I had returned the general's letter to my father. It was a soft, clear evening, and we loitered, speculating upon the possible meanings of the violent and incoherent sentences which I had just been reading. We had nearly a mile to walk before reaching the road that passed the Schloss in front, and by that time the moon was shining brightly. At the drawbridge we met Madame Perrodon and Mademoiselle Lafontaine, who had come out, without their bonnets, to enjoy the exquisite moonlight. We heard their voices gabbling in animated dialogue as we approached. We had joined them at the drawbridge and turned about to admire with them the beautiful scene. The glade through which we had just walked lay before us. At our left, a narrow road wound away under clumps of lordly trees and was lost to sight amid the thickening forest. At the right, the same road crosses the steep and picturesque bridge, near which stands a ruined tower which once guarded that pass, and beyond the bridge an abrupt eminence rises, covered with trees, and showing in the shadow some gray ivy-clustered rocks. Over the sward and low grounds, a thin film of mist was... okay. Sorry about that. I'm going to mute that. It's trying to get me to update. It was an update noise. Well, okay. No more strange noises. Let's see. I have to find my place. What? Where is it? Where is it? Over the sward and low grounds, a thin film of mist was stealing like smoke, marking the distances with a transparent veil, and here and there we could see the river faintly flashing in the moonlight. No softer, sweeter scene could be imagined. The news I had just heard made it melancholy, but nothing could disturb its character of profound serenity and the enchanted glory and vagueness of the prospect. My father, who enjoyed the picturesque, and I stood looking in silence over the expanse beneath us. The 2 good governesses, standing a little way behind us, discoursed upon the scene and were eloquent upon the moon. Madame Perrodon was fat, middle-aged, and romantic, and talked inside poetically. Mademoiselle de Lafontaine, in right of her father, who was a German, assumed to be psychological, metaphysical, and something of a mystic, now declared that when the moon shone with a light so intense, it was well known that it indicated a special spiritual activity. The effect of the full moon in such a state of brilliancy was manifold. It acted upon dreams. It acted upon lunacy. It acted upon nervous people. It had a marvelous physical influence connected with life. Mademoiselle related that her cousin, who was mate of a merchant ship, having taken a nap on deck of such a night, lying on his back, with his face full in the light of the moon, had awakened after a dream of an old woman clawing him by the cheek, with his features horribly drawn to one side, and his countenance had never quite recovered its equilibrium. "The moon, this night," she said, "is full of odyllic and magnetic influence. And see, when you look behind you at the front of the Schloss, how its windows flash and twinkle with that silvery splendor, as if unseen hands had lightened up the room to receive fairy guests." Okay, there's a little thing in here for odyllic, because it's not idyllic, it's odyllic. Od was a term given to a mysterious vital force in nature. See The Odic Force by Karl von Reichenbach, University Books, 1968. Waiting. Someone is back. Someone is trying to come back. But you can't hear him when he cries like that, so I think I just will leave him out for now. It is better this way. That he does not know the horrors of Carmilla. Okay. There are indolent states of the spirits in which, indisposed to talk ourselves, the talk of others is pleasant to our listless ears, and I gazed on, pleased with the tinkle of the lady's conversation. I have got into one of my moping moods tonight, said my father, after a silence, and quoting Shakespeare, whom, by way of keeping up our English, he used to read aloud, he said, "In truth, I know not why I am so sad. It wearies me. You say it wearies you. But how I got it, came by it. I forget the rest, but I feel as if some great misfortune were hanging over us. I suppose the poor general's afflicted letter has something to do with it." Is he going to be quiet? Okay. At this moment, the unexpected sound of carriage wheels and many hoofs upon the road arrested our attention. They seemed to be approaching from the high ground overlooking the bridge, and very soon the equipage emerged from that point. 2 horsemen first crossed the bridge, then came a carriage drawn by 4 horses, and 2 men rode behind. They seemed to be approaching from the high road. Okay. It seemed to be the traveling carriage of a person of rank, and we were all immediately absorbed in watching that very unusual spectacle. It became, in a few moments, greatly more interesting, for just as the carriage had passed the summit of the steep bridge, one of the leaders, taking fright, communicated his panic to the rest, and, after a plunge or two, the whole team broke into a wild gallop together, and dashing between the horsemen who rode in front, came thundering along the road toward us with the speed of a hurricane. The excitement of the scene was made more painful by the clear, long-drawn screams of a female voice from the carriage window. We all advanced in curiosity and horror, my father in silence, the rest with various ejaculations of terror. Our suspense did not last long. Just before you reached the castle drawbridge, on the route they were coming, there stands by the roadside a magnificent lime tree. On the other stands an ancient stone cross, at the side of which the horses, now going at a pace that was perfectly frightful, swerved so as to bring the wheel over the projecting roots of the tree. I knew what was coming. I covered my eyes, unable to see it out, and turned my head away. At the same moment, I heard a cry from my lady friends, who had gone on a little. I didn't say come of terror, did I? I mean, I just said it now, but oh, ejaculations of terror. Okay. Yep, ejaculations of terror. Classy. Curiosity opened my eyes, and I saw a scene of utter confusion. 2 of the horses were on the ground. The carriage lay upon its side, with 2 wheels in the air. The men were busy removing the traces, and a lady with a commanding air and figure had got out, and stood with clasped hands, raising the handkerchief that was in them every now and then to her eyes. Through the carriage door was now lifted a young lady, who appeared to be lifeless. My dear old father was already beside the elder lady, with his hat in his hand, evidently tendering his aid and the resources of his schloss. The lady did not appear to hear him, or to have eyes for anything but the slender girl who was being placed against the slope of the bank. I approached. The young lady was apparently stunned, but she was certainly not dead. My father, who had prided himself on being something of a physician, had just had his fingers to her wrist and assured the lady, who declared herself her mother, that her pulse, though faint and irregular, was undoubtedly still distinguishable. The lady clasped her hands and looked upward, as if a momentary transport of gratitude, but immediately she broke out again in that theatrical way which is, I believe, natural to some people. She was what it was called a fine-looking woman for her time of life, and she must have been handsome. She was tall, but not thin, and dressed in black velvet, and looked rather pale, with a proud and commanding countenance, though now agitated strangely. Was ever being so born to calamity? I heard her say, with clasped hands, as I came up. Here am I, on a journey of life and death, and prosecuting which to lose an hour is to possibly lose all. My child will not have recovered sufficiently to resume her route, for who can say how long? I must leave her. I cannot, dare not, delay. How far on, sir, can you tell, is the nearest village? I must leave her there, and shall not see my darling, or even hear of her until my return 3 months hence. I plucked my father by the coat and whispered earnestly in his ear, Oh, Papa, pray ask her to let her stay with us. It would be so delightful. Do, pray. If Madame will entrust her child to the care of my daughter and of her good governess, Madame Pardon, and permit her to remain as our guest under my charge until her return, it will confer a distinction and an obligation upon us, and we shall treat her with all the care and devotion which so sacred a trust deserves. I cannot do that, sir. It would be to task your kindness and chivalry too cruelly, said the lady distractedly. It would, on the contrary, be to confer upon us a very great kindness at the moment we most need it. My daughter has just been disappointed by a cruel misfortune, and a visit from which she had long anticipated a great deal of happiness. If you confide this young lady to our care, it will be her best consolation. The nearest village on your route is distant, and affords no such inn as you could think of placing your daughter at. You cannot allow her to continue her journey for any considerable distance without danger. If, as you say, you cannot suspend your journey, you must part with her tonight, and nowhere could you do so with more honest assurances of care and tenderness than here. There was something in this lady's air and appearance so distinguished and even imposing, and in her manner so engaging as to impress one, quite apart from the dignity of her equipage, with the conviction that she was a person of consequence. Check something real quick. Her habits. Just looking at all the pages left. I just came upon, I just woke up, right? I just woke up, and I'm feeling so very tired all of a sudden. So very weary. Just I want to go take a nap. Maybe I can take a nap after this. That's acceptable, right? Even though you just woke up going to take a quick nap. I don't know why. Yeah. You just woke up as well, Rogettes? And you want to take a nap? I do have an option if I want to try to keep up, but this I'm lulling myself to sleep here. I'm lulling myself to sleep. Just want to check, the next clear breakpoint is very, very soon. It's the end of this page. We're in the first quarter of the page, and it's at the very bottom. So I think I might call it there so I can take a nap. I really wanted to finish Carmilla, but so sleepy. So sleepy. Let's see. Okay, you still can't hear him. I think the cat also wants to nap. By this time, the carriage was replaced in its upright position, and the horses quite tractable, in the traces again. The lady threw on her daughter a glance which I fancied was not quite so affectionate as one might have anticipated from the beginning of the scene. Then she beckoned slightly to my father and withdrew 2 or 3 steps with him out of hearing, and talked to him with a fixed and stern countenance, not at all like that with which she had hitherto spoken. I was filled with wonder that my father did not seem to perceive the change, and also unspeakably curious to learn what it could be that she was speaking, almost in his ear, with so much earnestness and rapidity. 2 or 3 minutes at most, I think, she remained thus employed. Then she turned, and a few steps brought her to where her daughter lay, supported by Madame Perrodon. She kneeled beside her for a moment and whispered, as Madame supposed, a little benediction in her ear. And then, hastily kissing her, she stepped into her carriage. The door was closed. The footmen in stately liveries jumped up behind. The outriders spurred on. The postilions cracked their whips. The horses plunged and broke suddenly into furious canter that threatened soon again to become a gallop, and the carriage whirled away, followed at the same rapid pace by the 2 horsemen in the rear. Wow. Just, like, this is a paragraph of... Like, this is 12 lines, and it's 2 sentences. Like, dang. They really weren't a fan of making sentences. They really liked their run-ons. They really liked their run-ons. And that's why I have a little bit of trouble with this, I think, sometimes, with the reading. Because, like, I'm waiting for the break. There's no break. At best, there's a semicolon, which isn't a true break. It isn't a true break. They abuse it quite a lot. Okay, and that is the end of this section. The next section is, let me check. Let me pop it back up. It is, where is it? The chapter, well, part 3, we compare notes. But I think I'm going to leave it off with this so I can go take a nap. Comfy, cozy nap with a cat. Let me see. Who is up and reading? Who is up and reading? I don't know why I'm so tired. I did sleep most of the day. And it's not like I went to bed particularly late. Let's see. Let's see. Who is doing this? Who is reading? Oh. Huh, Faust is reading. I wasn't expecting that. Okay. Let's go. Oh, he's reading scary stories. He's reading SCP stuff. Let's go say hello to him. Where is it? Faust. You kept being woken up. You slept a lot, but it felt like nothing. Did you happen to wake up with anything strange on you? Or any strange dreams of that effect? I hope that the next time you get to sleep is uninterrupted. No bad dreams. No mysterious marks. Just be careful. Let's see. And the certain stray cat's fault. I understand perfectly. In this upcoming week, I think I have something planned for Tuesday. And Wednesday we will continue Yomawari. We will see what happens after that. I will be posting the schedule sometime soon. Maybe not tonight. Tonight might be sleeping. But thank you very much for joining.